Hey guys, welcome back to My Catholic Perspective. I am Allie Marie. Believe it or not, it is finally the last Thursday of July, which means that I am doing a book review today, and I'm doing it on Resisting Throwaway Culture. It's a book that Evelyn did get a hold of. You can see the highlighter on the front. But it's basically, the subtext is How a Consistent Life Ethic Can Unite a Fractured People by Charles Camosy. So this book was sent to me by Peter, one of my patrons, and it was voted as the one that I would review for last month, but 1984 was more applicable. I wanted some more time to digest the information in this book because it is very dense and but like highly important. And so I have decided, I guess I'll just first explain like what a consistent life ethic is, where it comes from, and then I'll go into the different topics that Charles Camosy covers in this book. And I don't think I'm going to go really like in depth to how they're applied or how it's applied. I might do that over on Patreon for our Sunday videos because they are all current event type topics. However, some will play out in videos, I'm sure, and it'll be good just to dialogue about that. So but yeah, usually it's catechetical stuff, so feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification, get notified every Thursday at 3 p.m. for new videos. But for today, so a consistent life ethic is basically where you take topics and you have to separate it from a political definition and have a consistent view of life across the board. It is easy in theory. I watched quite a few different YouTube videos explaining what the consistent life ethic was. It was originally named by Cardinal Bernardine, who was the Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago he named it in 1981 at a lecture at Fordham University. And basically, he started with nuclear weapons, abortion, and capital punishment were the three primary pieces that he covered, and the New York Times they did an article on it saying how he spoke out about nuclear arms and abortion. And so then eventually he integrated in poverty, euthanasia, genetics, healthcare, and pornography to apply to this consistent life ethic as well. So it sounds easy in theory to say, oh, okay, well, this is like, abortion and wearing a mask are the same, like that would be a consistent life ethic, or, like protecting the vulnerable. That's ultimately what it is. It's a consistent life ethic ultimately maintains the integrity and dignity of the human person. So I'll get into the political aspect of it here in a second, but when we look at the consistent life ethic, it reminds us of our duty to protect the lives of persons at all stages of development, from fertilization until natural death, as well as give them aid and support. And that's regardless of one's professed politics. So it's difficult in our day and age when we have the media who has polarized the right and the left, when we have, whether you're going to vote Republican or Democrat, and if you vote third party, you're basically throwing your vote away. It's a vote for the other party, stuff like that. That is the ideology that has developed. However, according to a Gallup poll, Congress has a 19% approval rating. There is a huge push in the American culture for a major new third party. There was a poll that NBC News did with millennials that actually it produced a result of 71% of millennials see a need for a new major third party. And that, just like the left and right ideologies don't fit anymore. Over 50% would not identify as either Democrat or Republican. And Catholics used to be left-winged. Like, pro-life used to be a Democratic issue up until the 80s. And now suddenly Catholics have been pushed out of the left political party due to gender politics, due to, being pro-choice now. There are different aspects that have overridden the idea of welcome the foreigner and healthcare for all, make sure that everyone is taken care of. And while it seems, one of the talks that I listened to was like, well, it seems like it should be just really easy. We do have our subconscious conditionings. We do have our conditionings from our life. And so while something can seem to be congruent with what we believe, we really have to be willing to intellectually look at it and separate ourselves from the political definitions of what some of these things mean. So, there was another quote here that just says, it's contradictory to insist that future generations respect the natural environment when our education systems and laws do not help them to respect themselves. So again, this comes back to that inherent dignity that we are trying to uphold overall in human nature. Camosi says, values like the irreducible dignity of the person, nonviolence, hospitality, encounter, mercy, conservation of the ecological world, and giving priority to the most vulnerable are written on the hearts of many kinds of people. So across the board, generally speaking, people want good. We want to help other people find meaning. We want other people to feel needed. We want to feel needed. We overall want to cultivate community and find ways that we can support each other in our lives. That's what friendship is about. It's what marriage is about. It's what the family structure is about. There is something written on our hearts that is completely built for community, that wants to protect the inherent dignity of the human person. So, that being said, everything is interrelated. Pope Francis has come out in numerous publications talking about creating a culture of encounter. So Charles Camosi, in this book, he talks quite a bit about how with social media, we end up isolating ourselves with people, with media articles, media sources that line up with our political ideologies. So we are no longer challenged to the same degree that we used to be on our beliefs, If somebody's posting stuff that you don't like, and I'm guilty of this too, mainly because I'm kind of sensitive to some of the stuff that's going on right now. But if somebody's posting something that you disagree with, you can just unfollow them, and you don't have to look at it, and you can still be friends. And when you see each other at Meijer, you say, "Oh, hi, how's it going?" Whatever else. But the genuine conversation and the genuine introspection ends up getting removed because we just like to kind of cluster in these little groups of who agrees with everything, I believe. And I personally, I can't say I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of wanting that, I can say. I have a lot of friends that are left-leaning, and even with it, there is this identification with particular topics. But I do have friends that have differences of thought than I do. I'm pro-life, and I have some friends that are pro-choice. So, and I got to the point, at some point, that it was all of my friends do not agree with me on this, and I'm constantly having these conversations and trying to help them understand, and it's just not going anywhere. I really need to find some friends that are Catholic and supportive and have similar beliefs, because I just need that community. And ultimately, when we find a partner, we want to find somebody that is of the same mind. We want to find someone who's equally yoked, right? The Bible, that's biblical. And so that's just a big part of what we are as a community right now with social media, is we can isolate our political, and not even political, just ideologies in general, to say this is who I'm going to listen to, when the media has not done a good job of remaining unbiased. Even fact-checking websites are not always accurate, and even they tend to show biases. So it's looking at a human person and not reducing them down to a single thing. Treating them, it's called in an ad hoc manner. And so, for instance, with the abortion argument, you're 20 weeks along, genetic testing comes back, and there's a 9 out of 10 chance that the baby has Down syndrome. So suddenly, that person is being, the person in the womb is being reduced to something that might be a burden or ineffective. And resisting the throwaway culture, which is what Camosi called this book, right? It's resisting throwaway culture, would say when a person becomes burdensome or ineffective, you basically toss them aside. You know, euthanasia. When they get old and they don't have their personal autonomy anymore, which is 91% of like why people ask. It's not because of pain. It's because they feel like they're a burden to other people. They've lost their own ability to function. They've lost like bladder or bowel control. It has more to do with pride on why somebody wants to experience euthanasia, to the physician-assisted suicide, rather than live to your natural death. And when these conversations end up taking place, it's discovered, oh, it's actually because the sister is having to come in from out of state and has to stay for weeks at a time and this and that, and I just don't want to be a burden anymore. I just want to be done. I'm not going to get better. And so but so that's treating it in the ad hoc manner. That's taking it, it's reducing the dignity and worth and what this person can still contribute to the world, and reducing it down to a disability or down to an ailment of some form. So the consistent life ethic essentially takes a whole slew of topics. Like I said, Cardinal Bernardine had taken it and started with nuclear weapons, abortion, and capital punishment, and went forward to include poverty, euthanasia, genetics, healthcare, and pornography. Charles Camosy, I know at some point here, mentions the whole list of different topics that he could have covered in this book. You know, police violence was one of them that he didn't cover. And so there was this... So what does he cover in this book? I'll go through that really quick. He covers sex practices and cultures, which he says is a fundamental root of all of this stuff. Like, once we start looking at personal autonomy and privacy, we have to examine how that bleeds into everything else, because, again, everything is interrelated. We can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't eat cake, not gain weight. So he talks about sex practices and cultures, and like the hookup culture specifically, how that has negatively affected a lot of millennials, and how a lot of millennials don't want to participate in it, but kind of feel like they have to, because how else do you function in the world? Reproductive biotechnology, abortion, the poor and the stranger, ecology and non-human animals, euthanasia and the margins of human life, and state-sponsored violence. So, and what he does is he breaks all of these down. He goes into all these different reasons on why looking at these topics in a particular way would be considered either consistent with the consistent life ethic or not consistent with the consistent life ethic. And because, like I said, if you're truly looking to engage in this type of lifestyle that is promoted by a cardinal archbishop, that is promoted by Pope Francis, that is promoted by several other popes. Pope Benedict was a supportive of this. There are so many aspects that we have to intellectually grapple with to say, is what I believe actually there? Like immigration, you know, is that something that, like, it's hard with the media. It is near impossible to know what's actually going on at the border of the United States and Mexico right now. There are photos that go out that end up being discredited because they were taken from a certain angle that makes it look this way. But it's like, but is there actually something going on there that is not good, that does need to shift? And how do we be a part of that? How can we help? What can we personally do to get up off the couch and do what we can do in order to cultivate this culture of encounter, in order to cultivate a mindset, an ideology of practice universally, that every person is not reduced down to their race, not reduced down to their ailments, not reduced down to, you know, their gender, whatever it might be, that each person would be treated as a whole, that they would be treated as every part of their being as worthy of that inherent dignity and respect that I so often talk about. There's a small graph that I want to review that Camosy put in the back of his book here that talks about how a consistent life ethic, like what it resists and what it promotes. So it resists the reduction of inherent dignity for other ends, and it promotes the protection and support of the most vulnerable. So basically, again, not reducing people down to a particular, how can they serve me? It's just, this is a person, they are vulnerable and they deserve my protection. It then also resists individual autonomy and privacy that is detached from the duty to aid, and it promotes mutuality between persons, generations, and non-human creation. It resists language, practices, and structures which reduce the dignity of the marginalized and promotes movement toward the peripheries and hospitality. And then it resists violence and promotes a culture of encounter. So when we start looking at that, when we start looking at protecting the vulnerable, when we start looking at, promoting hospitality, promoting this culture of encounter where we're actually actively engaging with somebody person to person, face to face, not over social media anymore, not in the comment section, not, hiding behind a screen, but actually engaging in dialogue in person and learning what that person believes and why they believe it, and then focusing on the parts that you can find to agree with instead of finding the points that you disagree with, which is for me, I know is difficult. But that's ultimately where growth can happen. That's where we can say, oh, well, yeah, you think that people at the border should be treated with dignity and respect and not be in cages, and little children should not be in soiled diapers for days. I fully agree with that, and it doesn't do well to have that conversation and say, oh, well, that's not happening. Or it doesn't do well to say, well, yeah, of course I don't feel that way, but blah, 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 it would cost this much money or whatever, finding the points of contention that you would disagree with when there's an obvious, consistent life ethic that it's yeah, we can find our common ground. Where is our common ground? How can we find that? And then how can we move forward to cultivate that particular piece together, and ultimately plant those seeds? How can we come together for that? So that is the overall. Oh, look, as I'm seeing the highlighter from Evelyn, it's coming off the book onto my finger. I guess maybe this would wipe off. I'm not sure. It's a pretty I have sap on my finger too. Anyway, sorry. But it is just that's the overall concept of the book, though. That is, it's very insightful. It's very complex. It is not black and white. However, we can look at some of these topics and understand better what direction we could be promoting and what direction, where our common grounds actually are. He, for a lot of these, he has objections, and he goes through those objections, and he does this in Beyond the Abortion Wars too, one of his other books. He's a great philosopher. He's the associate professor of theological and social ethics at Fordham University. So he is actually a board member for Democrats for Life, and he's very much in tune with what it means to be a Catholic in today's day and age, and how we can go forward promoting that while still being grounded, because there are definitely some ideological aspects of being Catholic that just doesn't work. It's kind of that whole idea of, well, yeah, it would be nice if we could just go to a I'm not even gonna say it, but go to a protest or a riot. It'd be nice to just say, well, I'm just gonna be Catholic, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna plant some seeds and I'm gonna talk with these people, when there's actual high level risk, and that might just be the media talking. I don't know. I don't feel like risking that level, but we are still called, especially with the marginalized and everything like that, we are called to kind of take a leap of faith, so to speak, and reach out and do what we can. And maybe that's giving $10 to somebody that's begging for money on the corner of the street and just saying, God, he is responsible for his decision. I am going to help him how I can. Or I know I've talked with some, asking them if they have a resume and giving them my card if they want to get one together to go to the library, and willing to work with them. That type of stuff. How can we meet people and help them in their journeys if they need the help or want the help or welcoming of it? And And how can we do that? How, is it stopping and giving someone a ride to the gas station and filling up their tank for them? Is it something as simple as that? Or, is it more integrated and they need a place to stay for a few days? And obviously we need to be smart about those decisions as well, and take into account our stages of life and safety of our family and everything like that. But we are called to do what we can in whatever way that we can, that we are convicted to. And it's not about comparison. It's not about, well, I have to do this because Susie Q is doing that and this person's fostering 10 children, so of course I need to do that too. Like, we all have our own individual callings and we all have our own individual passions. And so listening to that, spending time in prayer and meditation and seeking the Holy Spirit in that, we will ultimately find what areas, like the Holy Spirit will convict us for what areas we are not living out a consistent life ethic, if it's something you're interested in looking into. But this book, The Resisting Throwaway Culture by Charles Camosy, will help you kind of get there. He does a great job laying it all out. You can also, you can just Google consistent life ethic. There are YouTube videos on it. One video that I watched was another lecture at one of the anniversaries. I think it was the 40-year anniversary. Was it 40? Yeah, no, 40 years is next year. 30-year anniversary, 25-year, I don't know. But somebody gave kind of a reflection on Cardinal Bernardine's lecture of the consistent life ethic. So those are my thoughts. And thank you again, Peter, for sending this book. It was very just insightful and thought-provoking, challenging for sure on certain issues. I personally don't feel like I fully identify. I'm like with that millennial poll, right? The 71% seeing a need for a new major third party, and that, I do identify as a conservative, but I know that there are certain aspects, like I'm not like a hard right conservative. I'm very much more in the middle, and although I was raised in a very far, this was Republican and this was Democrat, this was independent. So like that was the house I was raised in. And so I know that I have some conditioning within me that ends up, in discussions that I have. And my parents are both very, very smart. My father's very bright and successful. And so sometimes when I have conversations with him, it's easy to just say, wow, you really know what you're talking about. Yeah, that makes sense. But there's always that other aspect to consider. And I just think that this book has really helped challenge me in that with certain thought processes, not necessarily with the inherent dignity of life, but, just different other politically skewed ideologies that the media has like attached to either right or left wing thought. So I hope you get a chance to check it out, though, and if you don't, I hope that this video at least kind of gave you some insight into different ways that we can live as Catholics in today's world, and I just pray that God is able to grant you the resources that you need to draw closer to Him and to those around you, and that you're able to make it a great day. You have 3 days left to sign up on Patreon to get a personal letter from me for as little as the $3 a month membership, so be sure to take advantage of that if you're interested, but otherwise I'll see you again next week, Thursday. Take care.